Hi, everyone, and welcome to the third installment of the Beyond the Diagnosis webinar series. Today, we're excited to have with us Ingrid Palmer, joining us to, oh, sorry, a couple more people just came in, joining us to share their experience on advocacy and creating a more inclusive society. Um, Ingrid, I'll let you introduce yourself and the important work you do. And Ingrid has agreed that we can have questions sort of come in as the presentation and the discussion unfolds. So I'll just remind everyone that you can submit your questions directly through the chat. There's also the Q&A feature built into the Zoom webinar that you can use. Or if you prefer, you can sort of raise your hand using the reactions menu, and I can unmute you that way. And then you can speak to Ingrid directly through your laptop or computer. And now I'll hand things over to Ingrid, and we can get started.
Thank you so much, Braden. I'm so excited to be here. Being with community is like always my favorite thing to do. So I'm really glad to be here with you today. Let me start off just by telling you a little bit about myself. I am a wife, a mother, a grandmother. I grew up for the most part in Toronto. I emigrated here with my family when I was 3 years old and have been here ever since. Currently, I am the founder of Focus on Ability. I also work at an organization called Realize, where I am the principal inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility leading to belonging advocate. So, principal ideal advocate for short. I am also the first vice chair of the Council of Canadians with Disabilities, which is a human rights organization that's made up of organizations that are led by people with disability for people with disability. And we are coming up to celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. So, been around for a pretty long time. I am someone who lives with a rare condition called retinitis pigmentosa. It's a condition that I was born with, and essentially, I have been slowly and continuously going blind my whole life. So, living with sight loss for me has been lifelong. And with losing your vision slowly and continuously, that meant continuous adjustment and learning how to live with new visual acuities and RP um, has its own really interesting and unique characteristics to live with. I've always had tunnel vision growing up, and so had a lot of trouble bumping into things and tripping on things just because they just simply were not in my field of view. I also had something called night blindness, so trying to see in dim lighting or at night was not possible for me, and also lacked depth perception. So my world was very flat. And I didn't get diagnosed until I was 14 years old. So that was 14 years of living and navigating in a world that seemed really topsy-turvy to me. And I couldn't understand how everybody else just seemed to move around seamlessly, whereas I was always struggling and couldn't explain because people would ask me, "Can you see?" And I would say yes, because I could. I just had no idea that I saw completely differently from everyone else. And I still remember very vividly when I was diagnosed. I was diagnosed at Sick Kids Hospital here in Toronto, and that was a year into me going into the child welfare system. I ended up becoming a Crown Ward in the Ontario child welfare system. And so my first year into care, I received the diagnosis, and I remember it being very complex because on the one hand, I was so relieved to have confirmation and validation that I wasn't pretending because I had that accusation so often because I couldn't explain my troubles. And then I also felt a great sense of loss and grief when I was told that there was no cure and that there was no treatment and that I would slowly lose my vision and go blind. And I remember thinking, what is going to happen to me? What am I going to do? What does a blind person do? And I remember at the time, and for, years, I couldn't think of anything because there wasn't any representation. I never saw other blind people my age. I thought blindness was something that happened when, you were, a senior. And so, and as a young Black girl, I never saw any other Black people that were struggling with that. And so I just had no idea. And diagnoses at times can seem like, that they have really changed our lives, and they do, but not in necessarily the, overwhelmingly negative ways that we might think so at first when it feels really new. And one thing I can say about my diagnosis and my journey with blindness is that it has made me the person I am. It has really shaped me, and I really like me. I love, I like who I am. I like how I think about things and people, and I feel that it has given me a lot of depth and a lot more breadth in myself as a person than I would have had without this journey. So I hope that our time together this afternoon is going to be one of exploration, and I hope that at the end that people come away. Feeling good, feeling that you have some more knowledge, really understanding that while um, a vision loss may shape our lives in ways that we hadn't predicted or counted on, that we understand that our worth remains the same, and that's at a very high level. But I remember, and I wanted to throw out to folks just to get us talking. Um, if you um, can think of like anything that um, you wish that someone had told you early on, or that you wish that someone would talk about, or you haven't had the chance to um, vocalize. Because I just remember sometimes wishing that, oh, I wish someone had told me or explained this type of thing to me earlier on instead of having to just find out through just life experience. I just want to pause for a moment and give people a chance if anyone had anything that they wanted to throw out there.
I'm monitoring the chats and the Q&A. We have had one question come in, but
Hmm.
I think it's unrelated to this.
Okay,
So I mean, I can send that. I'm just seeing if any other audience members are going to reply here. We don't have any raised hands.
that's
Um,
okay. We can keep going. I know one of the main questions that a lot of people have is tends to be around their future and can I still work? I know for myself I used to think because I did really well in school and I was like, should I still keep going to school? Can I even get a job and can I even work? And the short and simple answer absolutely is yes. And that blindness or low vision doesn't stop our dreams, our ambitions. It does mean that sometimes we have to go about things in a different way than we might have envisioned, but that all our dreams are still possible. There are people, I know people who work in absolutely every sector. I can't think of one where there isn't, interestingly, um, in education, in law, especially I know so many blind lawyers, in healthcare, um, in technology, especially in finance, um, and so much more. Entrepreneurs who own and run their own business. So there really isn't any area that anyone should be holding themselves back from it and thinking that, I can't do this because I have low vision or that I am blind. So I hope that everyone's dreams and ambitions are intact, and we don't have to necessarily have all the answers of how we go about things and pursue things. But I definitely would encourage you to go after your dreams and to seek resourcing and help. There are a lot of organizations, including, of course, the Council of Canadians, Blind Canadians, that can offer support in that area. I did have some questions. Technology, of course, has been the great equalizer um, for blindness and visually impaired. The amount of technology and apps that we have now to help in a variety of ways are quite vast than when I was a child. Some of the questions, common questions that can come up around blindness or vision loss, besides, can I still work? Can I pursue my dreams? Is sometimes having people have questions around being believed by others. And I'm not sure about the folks on this call, but I know that I definitely experienced that. There are a lot of stereotypes around what blindness means and how that presents. And it can be a real effort to really educate people on what blindness is. I don't know if any of you, and you can throw out some interesting questions or comments that people might have said to you, but I definitely have one where people will say to me, like, they'll be really amazed that I look in their eyes when I'm talking to them. And I'm always like, I always find that so funny. And people say, but you're looking right at me and you're looking right in my eyes, and because I'll tell people that I can't see you at all. You're just a voice that, kind of comes out of this void. And they're always like pretty amazed if I look at them. So I don't know if any of you have experienced anything like that or any interesting questions. People have also said to me, "Oh, you don't look blind." Um, has anyone ever had, you know, interesting things that people have said to them that you're just like scratching your head at?
One of our audience members has agreed with you. Leslie has said, "I also have had vision loss from birth and wish my parents understood more about my vision, and then they might have found more resources. However, the resources were slim 60 years ago." So
Yes, absolutely were. I remember in high school and living in the group home too, and trying to connect me to resources and being told that because I had usable vision, that I should use it. Which is true, but there was a denial of learning Braille, of learning about any other ways of doing things because I had usable vision. And that's something that I really advocate for now that I hope has changed because I can't read Braille now that I could use it. It's much easier to learn things like when you're younger. I think that we all know that. And I really feel bad for myself in the sense that I think that that was a real disservice to say that I couldn't have any access to resources or services until my vision um, had declined to a certain point because I still struggled a lot, even though I had some vision. And of course, trying to explain your needs to other people can be really difficult because people often feel like they know. Um, either better than you what you need, or don't understand that even though you're living and experiencing something, that it can be really difficult um, to explain it. Um, but one of the things that my daughter tells me that she gets asked a lot when she tells people that her mother's blind is that she gets asked if I know sign language. We're always like, how does that connect? But it happens so often that people will say, oh, well, does she know sign language? And one time somebody asked me, how do you know when you're awake? And I was just completely dumbfounded. So that's why I was asking you if have you ever had any questions that make you scratch your head? And in a way, the question about being awake, I kind of thought, okay, maybe they think, people often envision blindness as complete darkness, which I try to educate people um, is not true at all. Most blind people actually have some type of vision, and sometimes when I don't see anything at all, it's like it's a very light fog. I'll say to people like I feel like I'm in a white cloud. It's not complete darkness. So I didn't know if that was that what that person meant, if they thought that I was just surrounded by darkness all the time and maybe couldn't tell when it was daytime or nighttime. But I mean, I still know when I'm awake versus sleeping. But having to navigate and deal with um, interesting questions is definitely something that we go through. And I like to tell people that we don't have an obligation to educate people. You always have a choice. You definitely can direct people online if they're really interested in learning about blindness. There's lots of resources. It's really important that you conserve your energy and that you care for yourself. But if you do, some days we do have that, and we can say, like, oh, let me explain to you XYZ about my experience or about blindness. But I think it's really important to understand that, we can educate and advocate. Um, in the ways that we can and that we have, because that can change from day to day because each one of us is dealing with different things on top of vision loss. And we might need help to advocate because we might actually not have the words at the time. And that's why I think it's really important to be in community, to be connected to organizations like the CCB, because you find that nobody gets it like community. You don't have to explain things in the same way that you do when you're around other people who have experience of sight loss, the way that you have to do with people who have no understanding of it. People who have been navigating this journey for much longer will definitely have advice. They can share things that are the ways that they've navigated certain questions or experiences. When you're trying to figure things out on your own, it can be really tedious. But to be in community with other people, you'll often be able to save time and energy by hearing from other people about things that they have tried or done, words that they have used, um, that they have tried that have worked with other people. And not only that, but countering that feeling of isolation, of not being understood, of not being believed, because people have their own notions and stereotypes of what blindness means. I've had people tell me about, their blind grandmother or cousin, and I'm like, well, I am not that person. I am me. People not understanding that blindness is caused for many reasons and that it presents very, very differently, or having seen a movie or read a book, think that, that's all there is to know about being blind. So being able to fill your cup with community is really important, and also understanding that you're not alone, and the things that you're experiencing are also experienced by many of us. Having to have people understand that I will recognize voices before faces, even when I could. Like now, I can't see people at all anymore, but when I could. A lot of times people would be confused that I wouldn't say anything when they were around me, but if they spoke, I'd be like, "Oh, Mark," or "Oh, whoever," because I would recognize their voice but not recognize them visually, and that would be really confusing for some people. So no matter what it is that you're going through or how it presents for you, know that it's real about how, our vision changes with the type of lighting that we're in, indoors, outdoors, where we are in relation to that light source. All of those things matter. But a lot of times people don't understand that. I just wanted to pause for a moment, Braden, in case there were any questions or comments from folks.
Yeah, there's been a few. Leslie has agreed with you. Yes, people often ask me, "What do you see?" which I find very difficult to answer because I don't know what they see. And Sharon has shared that she had tunnel vision for many years from glaucoma, and people could not understand how she could read but still be legally blind, and often ask her why.
Yeah.
And Louise, oh, sorry, Sharon commented right under that, saying that she started to lose her vision at age 14 in the 1960s. And then Louise has shared that yes, losing my sight later in life, I often hear, quote, "You don't look blind," and also, quote, "You are very mobile, so you must see a lot and not really be blind." And her answer was that that is why she uses a white cane and now guide dog, who knows how to get her around safely.
I completely understand and resonate with all of those comments. Not being blind enough and being too good at doing something to be blind, all of those experiences are something that I'm sure that we all share in common. And I remember I would say to people at times like, "This is my reality. I live in not seeing well." So yes, you that is your familiarity, that is your space. So of course you can navigate within that. But I navigating accusations, it's very tiresome um, when people don't believe that you don't see as well as you say you do, because how could you possibly do XYZ then if you couldn't see? Um, you know, I've heard some other blind people say that people ask them like, how do they get dressed? Like the expectation that we cannot do anything at all is really interesting. And that, of course, comes down to ableism as well, where people just feel like if you have some form of disability, then you absolutely can't do anything at all. And if you can, then you must be faking or exaggerating your symptoms. Um, and that's really unfortunate that we have to go through. Part of my job is on educating people, and I spend a lot of time on that. And I share a lot of my own personal experiences. That being said, I don't think that's something that everybody has to do. We shouldn't have to do that in order to be respected and validated. Um, so I'm not necessarily saying that people should or do have to do that. But I feel like for those of us who can, or for like me, that's actually like a part of my job to do that. So I am willing to do that. But I do find that the more conversations that we have, and that I feel like a lot of ignorance is from lack of exposure, and that the more that people with disabilities are integrated into the workforce, into the labor market, included in recreation, included in all the spaces, all public spaces, that people's um, lack of knowledge will be countered through that. And that's why there are so many organizations and advocacy organizations that are continuously fighting for our inclusion and the awareness that disability and ableism impacts absolutely every area of our life, and that our rights have to be upheld. Even as a parent, I know I used to be stopped when my children were very little and asked by complete strangers if I was allowed to be outside alone with them. And it's like, oh, well, thank you so much for your concern, but mind your own business. It's really interesting the ways that people feel they have the right to interject themselves versus the times when they could actually be really helpful. And oftentimes, sometimes those are the times when they don't choose to be. But having a lot of times people's intentions are really good, and sometimes people will ask, well, how do you respond when people ask you for help? And that assumption that we always need help, it's another way that ableism shows up. And I'll tell people that, you can just very politely just say, oh, thank you for offering, but I'm okay, or no thanks. Or if you do need help, saying, oh, thank you so very much, and just directing the person on how they can help you. And also letting people know that sometimes the best way that they can help you, they can just give verbal directions. They don't actually have to do the thing for us. Sometimes the best assistance is just by saying, oh, over to the left or the right or something like that, so we can still navigate ourselves. But the important thing to know is that we are always in control of the help that we are receiving, and that doesn't take away from our independence. I don't know if any of you have been grabbed while you're outside trying to navigate a street and have somebody, drag you across the street. I have had that happen a couple times and being taken in the actual opposite direction, perhaps of where I wanted to go from someone who intended well, but, you know, didn't do me any good because they took me in a direction that I didn't need to go in. Let me ask, have any of you ever experienced turning down help and then having that person feel really insulted because you expressed that you didn't need assistance?
Well, while we wait for replies to that, Leslie shared or asked the question, I should say. Ingrid, have you ever experienced the quote unquote hero syndrome where people admire you for doing things when they don't think you should be able to do? To me, we're not heroes, but are instead trying to live our best lives.
Yes, that is so true. I've had people, be amazed that, they'll say how articulate I am. Like, oh yes, I could speak, and it's people I've had really backhanded compliments. Like I actually had someone say to me one time, "Oh, you're actually smart, and I thought you were simple." And I was like, I was so shocked at the time that they let that come out of their mouth. What was even more shocking was that they seemed to be waiting for a thank you, like as if they had just made a compliment, which they did not get. So absolutely, I've definitely had some backhanded and some really off comments that people feel okay to say. I've been one of the ones that used to really irritate me a lot, where people would accuse me of having too much pride because for not asking for help. So they would see me, maybe I was trying to, I don't know, fit something into something else, and I would just keep trying. I didn't get it. So, we learn information from every failure, right? You learn that maybe it's not turned the right way, or maybe you got to go up a bit. And so that's always been the way I've operated. I'll just keep trying. And I see that as a great thing, but other people see that negatively. And I found that interesting. For so long. They would say that I have too much pride and wouldn't ask for help, and I was arrogant, and it's just like I could not understand that. And I just, realized that some people have a discomfort with struggle, and struggle, sometimes, cannot be that great, but struggle can be something that really grows you. It grows your strength, it can grow your resilience, it can grow your um, your persistence to a task, which I think disability absolutely teaches us. We're very good at pivoting, at being creative, at learning, at leadership. I think that disability teaches so many positive things. And one thing that I understand is that some people are very uncomfortable. Um, with what they see as perceived struggle, which I think for many of us is a learning opportunity. And that doesn't mean that there aren't times where I am completely frustrated at something because I'm not getting it or it's difficult or more complicated, particularly because of, having to do it blind without sight. But I don't think that overall um, or that our lives should be seen as something to be pitied um, because we do things differently. And I think that's something that can be very difficult for people who don't live with disability. But I've also seen this across disabilities. I actually had someone say to me who was in a wheelchair that they would rather be in a wheelchair than be blind. And those are these moments sometimes that really can really catch you off guard and take your breath away sometimes where um ableist statements can come from. It can come from people that you really um, don't expect it to. But there it is. But I definitely have found in my life experiences that there really is a great stigma against blindness. And I learned this a lot when I graduated from university and went out to get a job and often got called back for second and third interviews, but a lot of times would have employers say to me that they would prefer if I had a different disability, or if I had one person even say to me directly that they would have preferred if I had a mobility um, disability. So the discrimination that we have to overcome as a blind or partially sighted people is great, but we also have a plethora of amazing examples um, among ourselves, among our community, of our accomplishments, of the things that we can do. And I'm not talking about the everyday things like getting dressed and cooking and pouring ourselves a cup of coffee, being able to walk down the street. Not those type of things, that type of inspirational thing that we that's ridiculous that we don't need. Um, but you know, real accomplishments like running a business, being a parent, raising children is a humongous, great accomplishment. And there are many blind and visually impaired parents out there doing a wonderful job, and all the other things that we do that do deserve respect. But absolutely being praised for um, being, just being alive and doing the ordinary things that we do in life um, is, a real disservice to every disabled person that we have been talking about for years, and that I hope is really getting through to the larger community. But I'm sure that there are many people who are still experiencing that as well. Is there anything else that came up in the chat, Brayden?
Yeah, there's a few. So Sharon shared a story of someone who dragged them across the wrong street, and then they had to get back on their own. As
Yes.
well as Sharon as well said, family has gotten slighted because I have said that I don't need their help in that situation.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it was the same situation or maybe one of the other situations that you had mentioned.
Yeah, it could. be anything. And then people even to like fixing things that we did because it isn't perfect. And this is something culturally that I had to deal with a lot because I just found in my cultural community that perfectionism and in my family was just so great. Everything had to be perfect and perfectly straight and perfectly this. And if it wasn't, then somebody would come along and fix it. And I got into a lot of arguments with people about not fixing something that I did, and it was totally fine if it wasn't perfect. I'm not sure if any of you have had to deal with that as well, but it sounds like similar as well. And yeah, that
E-
turning
Esther
down
says
people.
perfect is relative.
Exactly. 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 Um, what else?
There's a couple other questions.
Okay.
Carla has asked. Carla has said, "Can I ask if you know what type of RP you have? Autosomal or autosomal dominant or autosomal recessive question mark. I have RP but wasn't diagnosed until age 25, but definitely at age 14 noticed I couldn't see in the dark or dim light but didn't know it was a problem. I just thought some people could see better in the dark. My flashlight was my best friend."
I love that. I thought I wasn't using my eyes properly. I used to try to like squint really hard and do these what I thought were like eye exercises to get them. I just thought I wasn't doing the whole seeing thing right. It's so interesting the way that you can interpret things when you're younger. And I don't actually know what type of RP I have because I act only recently learned that they were different kinds like that. So I know that the odd thing with my family is that usually you can trace RP down, like you can, even if it skips generations, on both sides of my family, it can't be traced. So it's either that it was just carried recessively for so long and just, I was the jackpot winner. Um, but I find that my whole RP journey, if not that there is necessarily a norm, but it always seems to be different in a lot of senses. So I don't know exactly which one, but I would say that just from guessing, I would say that it's the more recessive one just because we can't trace it back for several generations on either side. When I was first diagnosed, they said that both parents had to be carriers. And then later on, they said that that had been updated to say that that wasn't true, that only one side had to be carriers. So I don't even know what side of the family, because we can't trace it back on either side for generations. Both sides say that vision difficulties only showed up later in life and was always thought to be due to, older age. So thank you for
Uh,
sharing that. But yeah, I'd love to learn more.
Someone with the handle "Thank You Lord" asks. Well, they've asked a few questions. So one is there any groups for low vision in Brampton, Ontario? I don't know if you have any insight into that, Ingrid. And then they've also shared that whenever I'm looking for something and don't see it, well, someone says it's right here in front of you, I get very emotional and cry. Is this natural? Then their last statement is, yes, someone told me that she would rather another disability than being blind, and it hurts, obviously.
Yeah, of course that hurts. It's so um insulting. No one should hear that, no matter what disability that you have. Um, I don't know particulars about each city, like so I can't recommend specifically in Brampton what is available. And I wonder if there is someone that you have close to you who could help you do a Google search, because I think it's so important to be connected. And I know that there are so many different types of activities depending on what your interest is. There are recreational um, groups that get together. Um, there are people who play bingo or play board games that have been adapted for visually impaired, conversational groups. I was once part of uh, what's the professional speaking group? Oh, I forget.
Toastmasters.
Yes, I was part of a Toastmasters one time. Um, and I know that there are groups too that maybe just get together once every couple of weeks and they go to a different place like and just gather together. So I hope that there could be somebody who could help you investigate what is close to you. In terms of your statement about yes, it's really the the descriptions that we get of over there, over here, right there, which has absolutely no meaning to us is very frustrating. And it means sometimes really repeating to people that I need very specific. You need to say left or right, up or down. That is what helps me. Over there, here, and right there have no meaning to me. And that's something um, that most of us like have to repeat until people get it. And I would say like very directly um, about how hurtful that is and why. And it's also important for us to protect ourselves from people who don't show empathy towards us. And also, um, it does take time to learn and to use different language. We can give that, but we can also tell the difference between when someone is really putting in an effort and when someone is being dismissive. And it's really important um, for us to express that when people are being hurtful with their words, because it's not just careless and it's not just something that could be dismissed. And I really feel for you when you said that because I understand that as well. But for people to really understand that language matters, and particularly for us who need verbal direction and verbal description, and people have different talent for this. There are some people who are giving direction and description, and it's excellent. They do it so well and so detailed that I definitely can picture it in my mind. And when they're working with me as a site guide, I know what's coming up. They tell you in advance what's coming up, and sometimes even in the amount of steps. And then you have other people who will tell you that you need to step down just before, and I'll catch myself because I'll feel like, oh, I'm gonna fall because I feel like I didn't get the information fast enough. So there are definitely different skill levels, but there are also willingness to learn and to grow. And I have a friend who always says to me, "Oh, I'm so terrible at this, and I don't feel like I'm getting better." And I'm like, "You are. You are getting better." But the most important thing to me, even though she'll still say things like right there and over there, is that she understands um her empathy level is there though. Like I can see that she really is trying, even if it's taking longer to change, versus when a person, I can also feel that when they really don't care. And the empathy just isn't, and the respect isn't there. So you really can tell the difference between those people. And I would, as much as possible, if you can, to surround yourself with those people who care about you and have your interest in mind and are actually trying. Um, and that kind of brings me to, although we have been touching on this, ableism and how it shows up in different ways. And so, we have ableism in structures and in our environment in the sense of the ways that things haven't been created for us. We do have a lot of tactile um, things on the roadways and sidewalks now, and when you travel on public transit, having things spoken aloud. We've come a long way um, in certain cases, and then there are certain areas where we still have ways to go. The fallback for blind and visually impaired is to have Braille. Whenever I go out to restaurants and things, sometimes they'll offer me, which is wonderful that they have that. They'll offer me a Braille menu, and I love seeing that availability. But at the same time, only 10% of blind and visually impaired, partially sighted people read Braille. That's a very small number. And so that means that we need organizations, people, businesses, and restaurants to think outside of just that fallback for Braille for us. The willingness to spend more time assisting. So if I go to a restaurant and I have a server who is willing to go through the menu with me if I'm dining alone, so appreciative of that. You're definitely going to get a bigger tip for me than that. And not everybody is willing to do that. So I am always really appreciative of that. But the more that we can normalize empathy and the willingness to help one another and not needing a reason to do it more than the fact that you can. And so why not help somebody would really be great. And these are the ways that we are working to make a society and to create a world where we care about one another and that we understand that being helpful to one another, taking more time, being patient, making yourself available, and being that type of person is not something that you need a reason to do, but is a way of life for all of us that we care about one another. It would be wonderful to get to that place where our world would be like that, where we just automatically do what we need to support one another and not feel like we have to have a reason to do it, or we only do it for our family members or our friends or people that we know. But imagine a world where we all care for one another freely and will do what we can for one another without needing some type of recompense or reason to do that and to be like that. I'm just always pausing, Braden, just in case.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. And you know what? Every time you've paused, there's been at least one or two comments or questions. I mean, Leslie took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to jump in and mention the CCB Visionaries. They're in Toronto, and they have chapters across the city. Um,
Do they have in
Leslie,
Brampton too?
well,
Because I
Leslie and I
knew
aren't
about that for
sure.
Toronto, but yes.
Yeah, and Brampton's within the sort of GTA, but it can be quite far. I was actually born in Brampton, so we're not positive. But what I'll do is I'll look into that, and if there is a Brampton location, I will include that in the recording email. Carla also suggests the CNIB. Um, they might be a good resource for the person in Brampton. And then more recently, Richard has shared the thing that really bothers me is when people that are assisting you assume that a sighted person that might be standing beside you is actually with you. He remembers a time when he was going for a medical procedure and the person behind the counter used a reference to something medical procedure, and the person behind the counter used a reference to something over there for another service window. I asked her to explain, and she tried to explain to the person standing beside me, which was my spouse. So I proceeded to tell her he's not with me. He just followed. Oh, I think they mean wasn't my spouse. So I proceeded to tell her he's not with me. He just followed me off the street. I don't have, I think it's no clue who he is. So it forced her to interact with me, embarrassed my husband, but it made the point.
Yeah, exactly. And that is another thing that happens so often, and not just for us with sight loss, but with people with other disabilities where if we are with somebody else, they'll talk to that person instead. But that is just so hilarious to be talking to a total stranger. But redirecting, I absolutely will. I wasn't always comfortable with that, although I would feel angry. I remember with one of my children when they were a baby and I went to the hospital. I don't even remember why, and my friend accompanied me, and even though I was holding my child, the nurse just kept talking to my friend the whole time. I was like, I am the mother. And they were like, oh, like it was just so shocking that I could, be my child's mother. But that happens so often. And I think it's really important, like you did, wonderful example to interrupt that and to, yes, force people. You are going to deal with me, you are going to speak with me, and you are going to learn how to do that if you don't have, because people have to become comfortable. And the only way to do that is through practice, through having to do it. And so it's absolutely important. I remember recently I went with my eldest girl to the hospital, and she's 33. She wasn't feeling well. And I went with her to emergency, and they kept saying, "Oh, what's wrong with her?" And I was like, I am the support person. I am fine. So even just when people see somebody with a disability and you're in a medical situation, they just assume that you must be the one in help. For us to be seen as leaders, as parents, as support people, it's very difficult for others, but we occupy those spots naturally. And the more that we speak up, advocate and force, yes, people to acknowledge the different roles that we hold, that we are not uh, necessarily in the position of having to be cared for. Yes, we can be sick at some point like anybody else, but that doesn't mean that we are not caregivers, that we don't look after, that we are not the leaders, that we are not in charge, that we are not decision makers. And so it's very important that we are able to interrupt that when it's happening and have people, we don't have to be rude, although people are often rude to us in those ways, but to simply say, I am so and so, I am in charge. Please speak to me directly, um, and just direct that person towards yourself. But yeah, good job in that instance for sure.
Esther has asked if there's a way to share your knowledge with schools and educators so that our population slash society can be more aware of your disabilities.
I do. What do you mean when you say like in general or me personally? Um, in general for us, I know the CNIB used to have an ambassador program where they would have volunteers who would do things like that, go into schools, go into classrooms, and talk um, to children and to people to educate them around vision loss. And I think any opportunity we can, my granddaughter, her teacher asked for me to come in. I went into my kids' classes when they were in school as well to speak. Any opportunity that we can have to do that is great. And if, there's also has to be a certain level of comfort in wanting to, because at the same time, it's not our responsibility to educate. I think it is helpful for those with lived experience to do that, absolutely, because we have the inside knowledge, and sometimes people get it wrong, um, you know, without our knowledge and our insight, but also recognizing that people have to be comfortable and want to do that. So that's why I say for those of us who are comfortable and are willing and want to do that, I think it's a wonderful way to provide education when those of us with the lived reality are the ones doing the educating, doing the speaking. Because when we're sharing things from a personal level, it resonates so much more than just perhaps getting the dry facts, which of course you can. They are available online. But there's something about storytelling from a person, and that's that personal perspective and insight that just sits and resonates with people on a different level. It's much more impactful. But I also want to recognize that it's not the duty of those most impacted necessarily to do that, and it has to be something that's coming from somebody who wants to do that and is comfortable and willing. But I have to say that that has the most depth of impact and has um, such important influence on the learning of people without that lived experience that I see all the time. I'll do presentations and really speak from, an academic perspective, explaining about the different models of disability, definitions, ableism, but whenever I bring somebody with me, I have another person with me, even though I could, but I'll bring somebody else who can just tell a personal story. Hands down, every time at the end, that's what people talk about. Hearing that personal narrative and how much it meant and how much it cemented all the other learnings. So whenever we have opportunities to talk to people, it's great. And that's why I love the work I do. Going into organizations, talking to government, talking to different people, going to conferences to try to share that. I love to see the aha moments that people have. Oh, I never thought about it that way before, or I didn't recognize or realize. Because a lot of times, people have good intentions, but that doesn't excuse the way it lands on people. Intentions are one thing, but the outcome is the most important thing. And if what you did or said hurt, it doesn't matter that your intention was to do good. We all have to learn to do things in a way that protect people, their dignity, that don't make people feel ashamed or make people feel like they're less worthy or that they're a burden or a bother to people. It's really awful when that happens. And sometimes people didn't mean that. But as I said, intention doesn't erase the hurt or the damage or the impact that comes from actions or words that land badly.
We haven't
So,
received.
mhm,
Esther has just agreed with a yes. But
mhm.
so far, outside of that, I'm just checking. There's no hands up. Nope. That's the only question we've received so far. I'll
Wanted to
also.
talk. Yep. No,
Oh,
sorry. Go
sorry. Go
ahead,
ahead.
Brayden.
I think we have as much time as you would like, but I forgot to mention before we started this, it is almost 4 o'clock. So
It
if you
is.
have other if you have other commitments, I just want you to be aware of the time. But I and our audience have as much time as needed. So
This
I'm not.
time went by so fast. I can't believe that it was an hour. But, I'd wanted to also to talk about disclosure, which sometimes for us is not an issue because, if we're using a cane or have a guide dog, um, there people know that we have a visual um, disability. But of course, for many of us too, there was a time when we had enough usable vision that we weren't using any type of aids at all. And um, disclosure is always like really personal. And there are times when you feel like it and times when you don't. And I just want to let the folks know that's always okay to know who to tell because sometimes, depending on people's situations, circumstances, you might not feel safe to do that. You can be in spaces where, I was on a cruise recently and they had a comedian and he was telling these really awful jokes about people with disability and making fun of us. And I got up and I walked out. And I didn't care that I was walking out in the middle of his show. I found his content to just be um disgusting. But there are times when like we might not feel safe to say that I have a disability. Um, and I think that's okay to choose when, where, and to who. And a lot of us also live with co-occurring disabilities. So just because we live with blindness doesn't mean that that's the only disability we live with. I also have like osteoarthritis. And I'll tell people that that impacts sometimes how I can use my cane. We know that you're supposed to hold it out to a certain level and at a certain angle and swing it back and forth. And there are some days where it's really hard to do that. And I remember once when I was using my cane, I guess more like a cane that you would use like, to like hold your weight. And that was because my knees and ankles were hurting me so bad. And I heard somebody say, "Oh, that's not how you're supposed to use that." And at the time it just made me laugh because like it's like I knew that's not how I'm supposed to be using it. But at that day I needed it that way instead of the way I wasn't walking alone. I was holding on to someone. Um, but the reality is that a lot of us are navigating more than one disability, and that is real. And whether we're disclosing about a visible disability or invisible disability, um, it can feel really tricky depending on the situation. If you don't feel like your workplace or the place that you're at is a safe place to do that because of comments that people have made, then you might choose not to disclose that. But I have shared with Braden a disclosure kind of guideline that we use at our work to help people decide whether or not disclosure is something that they want to go forward with when, thinking about when you would want to do something like that, knowing why, um, how would you introduce it or bring it up? Um, and whether it's a function-based disclosure, which means that it's because you have particular needs that you have addressed, and sometimes we can actually have those needs addressed without disclosing. And it's important that we have the choice of how we do things and in the best ways for us. And talking about accommodations, we didn't get to talk a lot about that, but understanding that we're protected under legislation, and that it's important that we know that we can and should assert our rights. That doesn't make it that it's clear cut. We know that there are uh, people who don't necessarily want to do what's right, even though they're legally obliged to. When I worked for a short time at the CNIB, one of the major complaints we heard from our constituency was the discrimination against guide dogs. And it's shocking that in this day and age in 2026 that we are still experiencing that taxi cabs, Ubers, that drivers are refusing guide dogs, and that even some restaurants are. And I used to go around and talk to restaurants and say, "Hey, could I come here with a guide dog?" And when they would say no, some of them I would say, "Do you know that that's illegal?" And a lot of them were really surprised and didn't understand that, that they couldn't do that. And I'm like, "Yeah, illegally, you are not allowed." And they'd be like, "Well, what about if somebody has an allergy or what?" And it's like, well, what about the person who needs their guide dog? You don't get to take someone else's need to use that as a reason to deny someone else their rights, and you are not allowed to deny someone their support animal in a restaurant. So it can be surprising how many people are ignorant of the law. In Canadian legislation, um, defines disability. And I really like how broadly they do in the ACA that they define disability as the interaction between your need and a barrier. And one of the reasons I like that is because I find accommodations has been delegated to the realm of disability and where it is stigmatized. And I'm like, I like to tell people that that's not true. Everybody at some point in their life will need an accommodation for some reason. It can be temporary, and it can be permanent, but everybody can be in need of accommodation, and everybody should have the right to have that. And the more I talk about that and frame it that way, I'm finding that taking it out of saying this is just for people with disabilities is helping to destigmatize that, because that prevents a lot of people from asking for the accommodations that they need because they don't want to be looked down upon, and they don't want to be judged either by their peers or by senior management or by anybody for that matter. I'm not sure if any one of you have experienced this, but understanding that you have the right to be accommodated in every situation, whether that's at work, whether that's an environment, that people have an obligation under Canadian um, legislation to make their places accessible. And I do hear stories from employees of employers stating that it's too great detriment for them, which is one out for them legally, but there's a high threshold for that. And an employer can't simply say, "Oh, this is too difficult for me to do," and get away with that, and that you can bring that to the government. I just want to pause for a moment. I know that we're over time, but I also want to, if folks are willing to stay on, I am also willing. If you have any other questions, I have also shared with Braden a link to a tool. It's called the Job. It's called JDAP. What does this D stand for? The Job Decision and Accommodation Planning Tool. And it's something for both employees and employers that you can use because you don't have to always know what accommodation you need. So this tool helps in both employers and employees to figure it out. It has a lot of different disabilities there, and then it has a lot of different possible accommodations. Because sometimes when I talk to employers, they're just like, I don't know. And it's like, well, you don't have to know everything, and neither does the person, but you have to be willing to support that journey. And the important thing is that people are able, both the person impacted and the employer or organization is willing to go on a journey together and discover that and explore that and try different things. Because you can think that something would be great, and then when you try it out, maybe it isn't. Maybe it just needs tweaking, or maybe it totally needs to be done away with. But the important thing is that we'll never um, be able to um, just know what's going to work just by thinking about it. It takes trying, it takes adapting, and it takes ongoing conversation to go back and say, hey, this was working well 6 months ago. Is it still working well now? Has anything changed? And that building of relationship and trust, whether it's between your family members, whether it's between an organization or an employer, is the most important thing. When you feel safe, when you feel that you can trust, when you feel that you won't be looked down upon, that you can be honest, that you don't have to know all the answers at once, but that you can go back and forth and, go on this journey together with someone. That's the most important foundation to me in accommodation, is that relationship, is that connection between people and that trust. After that, you can just keep trying different things to figure it out. But I really believe that that relationship is the key to building um, accommodation and support systems that work for each individual.
I can, as Ingrid mentioned, I'll make sure to share the resources with the links that Ingrid has sent. I'll share those via email after we have put together the recording of this session. Thank you, Lord has also asked a question, Ingrid, if now's a good time.
Hmm.
So they've asked, I have low vision from advanced glaucoma. Oh, sorry, a couple more questions just came in too.
Hmm.
So I have low vision from advanced glaucoma. How do you stop feeling self-pity? Any suggestions?
Well, first of all, I would say that losing your vision, it's grief, right? And you're allowed to grieve. I think that's important to acknowledge. And I know that I have thrown myself many pity parties in my life, and I think that we have the right to that. We have the right to grieve and to cry. One thing that I would caution is staying there. We can't stay there long term. That leads to depression, um, and that leads to a lack of hope and a lack of motivation. But I think that we absolutely have the right to cry. And I would say that maybe once or twice a year, like I have that. And at different moments. I remember the day when I went to the bank about 3, 4 years ago. With my spouse, and I've always been independent with my banking. He would always stand back, and I would do my thing. And one day I went to the bank, and they had changed all the machines. And just like that, I thought, another thing taken away from me, another independent thing that I could do now gone. Because the font had completely changed. It was no longer contrastive. It was very light background, very light words. And ever since then, I've had to go into the teller. But that day, I cried. I cried because it was a loss. And I think that we have the right to grieve and to feel sad at times, but I would always caution against the danger of staying in that place. Have that release, but no, push yourself always to get back in there. And that's where we have to surround ourselves with this tribe, with community that will support us, that will acknowledge our feelings, but that also will push and support you um, to continue. So I want you to know that your feelings of sadness are real and that they're valid. I just also want you to have support people around you that will help you to not stay there, to help you to know that you will learn new skills and new ways of doing things, that you have community that you can talk to, that will encourage you, that you can laugh with as well. So I want to just acknowledge both those realities. I'm not, did I answer the question fully? Because I remember the grief part. Was there a second part to that? Was that
It was just if you had any suggestions, which I think you addressed.
okay? I did. Okay.
The person who originally posed the question has said thank you in the last just minute or so, less than a minute.
And thank you. Let's remember like to be compassionate to ourselves as well, as we are human beings and our feelings are all real and all valid, and they can be dismissed by others, but I don't want you uh to dismiss them or to dismiss yourself as well. But to know that your feelings are real. And I hope that all of us are, and if you're not, that you can soon be connected with community. I cannot underscore how important it is to be around folks who understand and who will fill your cup. We need each other. None of us can journey through this life alone, no matter what we are experiencing. We need others with us. So I implore you and plead for you to reach out as you have, and I hope that you can be connected with folks who you feel good about and with, and that you can continue to have these important conversations because they are important and they're real. And I want to thank all of you for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the conversation and the discussions that we've had here. And yeah, I would love to come back anytime because I really believe in this. If you heard me say about community and connecting and how important it is just to have space to just have these conversations and be able to ask and express things that sometimes we don't get to otherwise. So I just want to thank you all as well. You fill my cup as well, really.
Well, thank you very much, Ingrid. And I think I speak for everyone when I say that you're always welcome to host another session like this or a different topic. I should also say that there's been quite a few messages reflecting everyone's appreciation. Anne Mock has said that she really, really enjoyed your knowledge, and thank you so much for sharing. Elaine has said thank you for a great presentation. Leslie has said that she totally agrees with you, and thank you. Sharon expressed that this has been a wonderful session, and thanks so much. And Carla similarly says, thank you so much. You're a great speaker and presenter. Way to go. And I couldn't agree more.
Thank you all. Uh, I've had such a good time. The time when I was so shocked when Braden said it was 4 o'clock. That's how much I have enjoyed this time, and it just seemed to speed by. But absolutely, I was just thinking, like, even something as simple as conversation circles, just to do this, or if you have any specific thing that you would want me to come back for, just let Braden know. But absolutely, just spending time like you with this, I think is absolutely worth it. So I wish you all a great rest of your day, and keep being you, and keep charging ahead. You're doing great. If no one's ever told you or haven't told you recently how awesome you are, I'm going to tell you, you're all fantastic.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. And I'll also share, we typically send a sort of feedback survey after this. If there are topics that anyone would like to have Ingrid host another sort of discussion circle like this, or even another session altogether, just put your comments in the feedback survey, and I'll pass that along to Ingrid, no problem. And like I say, I'll also share the resources that Ingrid has shared. I'll do that tomorrow as well, and the recording of this session. So if there aren't any other questions, which I haven't seen any others come in, I'll get those emails sent by the end of the week, and I hope everyone has enjoyed this presentation and discussion. And I look forward to seeing you all again next week, July 28th at noon for the next part of our Beyond the Diagnosis session. That one is being hosted by Ben Fulton.